You made it clear you're a fan of natural fats. You also talked about the fact that the current dietary guidelines, the new ones, still have a cap on saturated fats. Do you see any reason for yourself or others to try and tame down the amount of high quality fat we're eating?
No, I see no reason. I just see no reason why we would have to. Like, it. I haven't seen any data. The biggest study, epidemiologic study, was called the Pure study, Pure. So the Pure study looked at multiple countries, and it was like, I think there's like 400,000 plus people. It was a huge, huge, humongous study, like the biggest study ever. And when they looked at the sort of how much saturated fat or total fat people ate compared to heart attacks and deaths and all that, there was really no relationship whatsoever. And then, if you think that saturated fat causes heart disease, then show me the data, show me the study where they've randomized people to, very little saturated fat versus very high, the normal saturated fat, and then followed them and shown a difference. And the thing is that they actually did that study. It was in the Framingham data. But because it didn't show any effect, this was done in the 70s or 80s. Because it didn't show any effect, they actually killed the study and never published it. So it's like, okay, so this data that you want, which is to say that eating more saturated fat is going to cause heart disease. Your own study couldn't show it, so you killed it. So there's no data there. And even so, then you have to go to secondary data like epidemiologic studies. And the biggest epidemiologic study in the world, which is the Pure study, published in the Lancet, so a very reputable journal, shows no relationship between how much saturated fat you eat and heart disease. So what exactly are you basing this evidence on? Like, just because you've always said that? Just because you don't want to admit you're wrong? Is that it? Is that the only reason this is in there? Truthfully, I think that is the only reason it's in there, but I don't actually know. So that's where, I don't worry about saturated fat in the least. Like in my own diet, because there's not that much data, you have to really just make your own decision, because it could be right, it could be wrong. But I can only tell you what I do. I don't even look at saturated fat. Like, I don't even worry about it in the least. My only question is it a natural fat? So butter. If it's natural, butter and olive oil. But if it's coconut oil, sure, no problem, right? So I use coconut cream and stuff in certain foods like curries and stuff. But is it a natural fat that looks like it came from nature and has been used for hundreds of years and thousands of years? If it is, then I'll eat it. If it's sort of the newfangled fat, like corn oil or safflower oil or canola oil, then I won't, because I'm not confident that it's not going to harm me. So that's more or less what I do. But yeah, I don't see anywhere that makes any data that makes me concerned in any way about eating more saturated fat.
How do you feel about these people taking butter, putting it on top of their steak, adding heavy cream to coffee? So not just eating the fat within the food, but adding more fat to it.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary either, right? So that was popular in the sort of mid part of the keto sort of craze. Was these people that would add extra fat. So if you want to add fat because it tastes good, sure, I'm okay with that. That's no problem. But the thing is that it's not like taking more fat doesn't help you lose weight. It's not that satiating, truthfully. So adding a lot of extra fat because you think it's good for you makes no sense. Adding more fat because it tastes good and you want to, sure, but know why you're doing it, right? So I actually don't, and I argued against it. There's this whole thing about fat bombs for a while. You should eat less of fat bombs. And I wrote a piece. I said, no, I don't think you should be eating fat bombs. Like, eat your normal food, right? If it's high in fat, it's high in fat, then eat it, right? But don't add it just for the sake of adding it. That makes no sense. Because again, if you're eating fat, what happens is that fat gets absorbed by chylomicrons into the lymphatic system and then into the fat cells. So it still gets stored in the fat cells. So eventually you're going to have to burn that off, right? So it's not like it's a free calorie or something. Yes, it creates satiety, so maybe you'll display something else. But it's not like it's free. It's still energy, so you still gotta deal with it in the end. It's, if it makes you satiated, and some people say this, right? They take the bulletproof coffee or whatever, right? The coffee and the butter. And then they said, it makes me so full, I just can't eat for the next, 10 hours. Well, then you may be better off doing that, right? But it's all variable, right? It's not like, oh, if you do this, everybody will benefit. Some people will do okay with it. Some people won't. You really have to see how you do. For the most part, I don't like that much fat, so I don't do it.
Throughout our conversation, we've been addressing weight loss in a general perspective, but there's a lot of talk in our world these days of visceral fat. Tie that in and how you look at that, somebody that is obese, and the fact that it can impact people that are actually skinny as well and they don't know it.
Yeah, so there's two types. There's the visceral and the subcutaneous fat. And visceral fat is the fat that's found in your organs, your fatty liver, and around your abdomen. And if you look at fatty liver specifically, if you look at what the problem actually is, it's mostly most of the fat that's in the liver. Because remember, when you eat fat, it doesn't go to your liver, it goes into your fat cells, right? It doesn't ever pass through the liver. Where the fat comes from predominantly with fatty liver disease is through de novo lipogenesis, which means that you're eating carbohydrates which in excess and in the presence of a lot of insulin gets turned into fat. You're turning glucose into fat. That's the term de novo, which means from new. Lipogenesis, the creation of fat. So the creation of new fat from carbohydrates. And that's what happens when you eat a high carbohydrate diet. So that sort of contributes to the fatty liver and the visceral fat much more than just general calories or whatever. Because if you eat a lot of fat, then it doesn't go to your liver. So a lot of it will get stored in fat cells, which is subcutaneous fat. So yes, you may still be heavier, but it's going to be subcutaneous fat rather than the visceral fat. And that's why the, cutting down the carbohydrates and, cutting down the insulin, reducing your insulin levels is actually quite important for fatty liver disease, for visceral fat, and, for general health.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
Different foods stimulate different levels of insulin. What's insulin's job? Well, to tell you to store more body fat. If it's chronically high, you're going to gain a lot of weight because you're moving a lot of glucose into the cells. They're going to fill up so that glucose